What about anxiety? What about the algorithms? What about life turning into blue screen and us getting lost in it? Hi, welcome to a new video where we're going to talk about technological advances, psychological perspectives, and personal opinions. We have the psychological structure that finds an interesting analogy to current prompt engineering practices. Users of LLM systems similarly operate through reflexive adjustments rather than systematic planning. For example, in so-called bytecoding, the stochastic nature of these systems has a reliance on we can call prompt stealthing, which transforms each interaction into an immediate wager, whose outcome cannot be reliably predicted from prior experience. This makes the production of outputs less a science than a product of chance. Users of systems like ChatGPT, Claude, Stable Diffusion, and even open weights models find themselves having to develop elaborate strategies to maximize desired outputs whilst acknowledging the unpredictability of generative artificial intelligence. These strategies could therefore be said to exhibit the same mixture of systematic analysis and aleatory hope that can be argued, characterizing gambling psychology, creating a kind of replacement to rational design processes or software engineering and replacing it with practices like byte coding, an effective coding practice that manifests as a kind of computational gaming culture organized around the optimization of prompts against probabilistic systems. This transformation of technical practice into aleatory experience generates what it can be called prompt anxiety. Prompt anxiety describes the psychological state produced when users must maintain a fiction of systematic control whilst confronting the irreducible unpredictability of stochastic outputs. Unlike conventional technological frustration, which usually assumes that knowledge or skill will give reliable results, prompt anxiety emerges from the recognition that no amount of expertise can eliminate the aleatory dimension of LLM interaction. We understand LLM as large language models. And now, the user experiences each prompt as a bet when this anxiety occurs, where even careful preparation offers no guarantee or required outcomes. This creates a distinctive, affective state characterized by an obsessive attention to textual details, such as word choice, syntax, formatting, or tone, but whose actual influence remains unclear. It also produces a tendency towards compulsive iteration through multiple attempts despite diminishing returns from the prompts and what we call, or that it could be called, interpretative paranoia that assigns systematic patterns to what it actually may be random variation from the system. Prompt anxiety thus represents a structural feature of how stochastic systems, particularly those used by platform companies, increasingly organize cognitive labor. This prompt anxiety can signal a broader shift in the organization of cognitive labor that recalls an analysis of modernity's relationship to chance and temporal disruption. To see this computational gambling psychology in practice, it is useful to examine the production of probabilistic media, that is, cultural or media artifacts produced through a stochastic computational processes that operate on probability distributions rather than deterministic rules. These forms of media are increasingly floating the internet and social media and serve as a useful example of the narrative processes in media production, although they are often despairingly called AI slop. We can see alongside regional computational analysis of LLM, a probability of distributions to examine emerging structure of feeling in working with new AI conversation interfaces. We can look briefly at prompt engineering communities, including discussions on platforms such as ChatGPT, from marketplaces like PromptBase, and widely documented practices like guild breaking techniques. The aim of these ensamples is to provide symptomatic readings that help to theorize broader transformations in how cognitive labor is being reorganized under vector capitalism. By vector, it is gestured to the way in which information is stored within vectors, within what it could be called vector space. This gives the models their power to generate new token arrangements in text or new forms of synthetic media generation. Indeed, we can think about LMLs in particular as token factories. Gambler can be useful for thinking about artificial intelligence and the specific modes of consciousness it appears to engender. We will look forward to LMLs more and what this prompt configuration as anxiety can tell us. Using LLM systems, users must similarly create prompts within the constrained interface of text boxes or parameter settings, making decisions about keywords, syntax, and formatting that will trigger the probabilistic generation process of synthetic media. We can also have prompt engineers operating within temporal constraints that compress deliberation. The same button functions rather like the dice throw, a moment of commitment that transforms careful preparation into an aleatory outcome. The temporal dimension reveals itself in the psychological forms that prompt engineering individuates. We also have the dialectical understanding of contingency, where contingency functions as the mediator between possibility and necessity. What becomes actual under specific conditions could always have been otherwise. Marx transformed this Hegelian insight by situating contingency within capitalist accumulation itself, arguing that apparently random events become systematically organized to create conditions for value extraction. Contemporary AI platforms similarly transform uncertainty from technical limitation into an extractive mode. Capitalist social relations thereby appear as natural properties of objects themselves rather than the social relations that create them. The prompt engineers relations to algorithmic uncertainty reproduces the classical structure of commodity fetishism, where human social cooperation appears as autonomous technological power. that unlike Mart's industrial commodities, AI systems reintroduce uncertainty into this fetishistic process, creating fissures through which in the social character of algorithmic production becomes inadvertently visible. Traditionally, the temporal compression of LLMs is an important part of the experience of prompt anxiety. It is argued, therefore, a distinctive psychological aspect where users experience each output from the LLM as a wager against unknown algorithmic possibilities. Consequently, we can see online forums dedicated to prompt engineering, which often reveal users developing obsessive strategies for controlling outputs that remain uncontrollable. For example, this can be observed in the elaborate prompt libraries that have emerged around LLM generation, featuring thousands of tested combinations designed to produce particular aesthetic effects. These libraries can be seen as similar to gambling systems, promising users greater control over outcomes whilst acknowledging that no prompt can guarantee specific results. The psychological mechanisms underlying these practices might therefore reveal deeper structural parallels with gambling behavior. What is interesting is that this psychological aspect of prompt engineering exhibits what was identified in political discourse as a paranoid style. This is a tendency towards elaborate interpretative schemes designed to display apparently random outcomes through hidden systematic patterns. Users of AI tend to develop complex theories about hidden biases, prompt injection techniques, and model alignment, issues that supposedly explain why their carefully crafted prompts produce unexpected outputs. These theories perhaps serve a similar psychological function to gambling superstitions, providing the illusion of systematic control over processes that remain stochastic. This paranoid interpretative tendency, in part due to the contingency of the output of these systems, finds material reinforcement in the design of LLM systems themselves. But it is crucial to remember that this contingency is not neutral. Indeed, it always occurs within a specific social relations that can be analyzed, contested, and potentially transformed through collective practice. It is argued that the technical architecture of these systems actively encourages a paranoid style through what developers call prompt sensitivity. Prompt sensitivity describes how minor alterations in input can produce dramatically different outputs. In practice, prompt engineers have developed an elaborate repertoire of techniques to manage this sensitivity. This includes chain of thought prompting, where the user instructs the model to think step by step before answering, forcing a more structured reasoning process. Through role-playing instructions, where the user assigns the model a persona to constrain its register and domain, various formatting directives that specify output structure through markdown headers, bullet points, and numbered lists, and temperature manipulation, where users who have access to this parameter lower it towards zero to reduce stochastic variation or raise it to encourage more creative outputs. Each of these techniques represents an attempt to impose a type of deterministic control over a probabilistic process, that this cannot completely eliminate the underlying stochasticity. Even with careful prompt consideration and construction, the same input can produce substantially different outputs across runs. This sensitivity creates what users experience as prompt paranoia, where every word choice becomes fraught with potential consequences that cannot be predicted in advance. Users therefore begin to develop elaborate techniques for prompt debugging by testing multiple variations to identify which elements produce desired effects, creating a form of systematic superstition around text manipulation. Thoughts configure the computational interface becomes a site where magical thinking emerges, representing a return to pre-modern epistemologies within ostensibly rational technological systems, where correlation becomes causation and pattern recognition becomes predictive power. His return to magical thinking within computational systems revealed to magical telling us how deeply the game of psychology has entered our technological interactions, where systematic analysis gives way to superstitious practice. Here, the computational and way to superstitious practice, they are met, revealing how LLM interaction shares the campus relationship to chance, calculation, and temporal compression. Much of what these prompt engineering communicate through vernacular experiment and that have been investigated by the model developers keep continue doing it so themselves. We also have that a single word changes to a prefix, such as things have been really hard to things have been really good, produces very different activations of these so-called emotion vectors. On subsequent semantically identical tokens about a shared event. The model's internal affective state apparently carries forward through the context, shaping output at positions where the tokens themselves contain no emotional content. From anxiety, in this sense, has a geometric twin as the user feels the uncertainty that the model's concept vector activations are mechanicalistically producing. To examine these claims more concretely, it was developed a research instrument called LLM Bench, a web-based tool for the comparative close reading of LLM outputs that enables researchers to subject AI-generated texts to hermeneutic close reading. LLM Bench includes a token probability visualization mode that makes the aleatory dimension of text generation directly observable. Using this tool, it was able to send the same prompt to two different large model languages. If you want to know more about this paper and about other things, remember to pass by to the next video. We're going to talk more about the concept of double movement, and we're also going to continue talking about the artificial intelligence models and some of the most common ones. The paper is on the description box, and if you want me to read a article, let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. For you, did you ever make this comparison between gambling, and trying to control a prompt? Let me know.